doesn't work.
There might be some.
I have. I put it too.
Okay, today is Tuesday, January 18th, and the time is 5:30. We're reconvening the briefing meeting of today for the second School District of Lee County Superintendent of Schools candidate interview with Christopher Bernier. Welcome, Dr. Bernier.
Can't hear.
So I'll turn it over to Debbie Jordan, our board chair, for introductions.
He
Thank you.
just said something and we
Dr.
didn't hear
Bernier,
him.
can you speak one more time, please? Because I don't think we heard you. I know we didn't hear you.
No,
Nope.
Oh, no, you are, I see that you are,
muted.
you're
Yes, we
muted,
can
yes.
hear you now. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you and good evening. My name is Debbie Jordan, and I'm the board chair, and I also represent District 4. I'd like to introduce the other board members. We have Ms. Mary Fisher, District 1, Ms. Giovanelli, District 2, Ms. Chris Patrica, District 3, Ms. Gwinnetta Gittins, District 5, Ms. Betsy Vaughn, District 6, and Ms. Kathleen Morgan, who is District 7. Also on the dais with us, we also have our school board attorney, Ms. Dupree Bruno, and our two assistants over there, Ms. Roman and Ms. Thomas. And welcome. The board is pleased to have you as one of the top candidates for the superintendency of the school district of Lee County. We will begin to have a Q&A. We have approximately an hour and a half for this to take place. Each member will be asking questions. We will have approximately 3 to 5 minutes for a respond. In the beginning, we will have an opening statement, if you'd like, which would be approximately 5 minutes. And then at the end, we would then ask you if there's any questions that you may have of us, and a closing statement, and I would return that back to Ms. Fisher at the end. So I welcome you, and please begin with your opening statement.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this process. You truly have an amazing school district. Having been a native of Florida for more than 30 years was an opportunity of a lifetime when I saw the job advertised. I don't want to go any further, though, without recognizing the weather events that went on over the weekend, and make sure that you, your families, your extended families, and the students of the school district are also in good stead. I know that sometimes national news can blow some things out of proportion, but it seemed extremely serious. And just wanted to, our hearts and thoughts and prayers are with you and the community at this time, because I know how devastating those natural events can be within a community and certainly within the state of Florida.
Thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
So just quickly, briefly about me, you have a lot of information about me, both from the search consultant and the materials that I provided and they provided. So I would tell you some little things about me that your human resources people probably don't want you to know. I'm the youngest of 5 children, raised by a single mom and 3 sisters. So I apologize for the heading of my cover letter. It's that dear gentleman. I make no excuses. I could, but I know growing up in a female household, that would not work. So I will just leave it at that. I appreciate the opportunity to be here despite my error on that document. I am a father. I'm a partner to a wonderful woman who we now have 5 children of ours, 2 of mine biologically, 3 of hers. Her 3 girls are married. We have 3 grandchildren. We are just amazingly gifted in terms of the young people that we have been fortunate to raise. And I find myself looking and wanting to be a community member back in Florida, to be a viable partner with you and the community to move things forward. I will tell you that the most important thing for you to know about me is the passion that I bring to the job. My personality will hopefully come out throughout the interview. I am not as great about Zoom as seeing people face to face and seeing their eyes and being able to interact. You won't get anyone with a better work ethic or a creative or a focus on the work. When you get Christopher Bernier like Dr. Jenkins before you and Dr. Jar here in Clark County, you get someone who commits to what Lee County's goals and standards are and will be. The values that I have, I'm always about students first. I believe this is a people business. Nothing gets done unless you're working through and with people. So I'm a relationship person. I hope to explore that later in a question. I am the type of individual who's a hands-on servant leader. I believe that you can't do the work from a perch. You have to get on the ground and be with the people who are doing the work in order to fully understand what's transpiring. I did hear in one of the board meetings you were aware of my exceeding expectation statement, which is really about a drive for excellence. If excellence is the standard, then you have to try to exceed expectation to get that. And I would share with the board before we get started that the one aspect of me that's non-negotiable is my integrity. And that leads to a great fiscal steward of public tax dollars and someone who understands board policy, board procedure, and the rules of the game. So look forward to your questioning. Looking forward to the opportunity to explore me a little bit more. And thank you again for the opportunity, and good to hear that the community is as safe as it can be right now.
Thank you. And we're going to begin this evening with Ms. Fisher. Ms. Fisher?
Yes. Good evening, Dr. Bernier. During the first year, how might you go about determining the strengths and weaknesses or needs of our school district? And what specific steps would you take?
And then I don't know if this will translate via Zoom with only being able to look at one board member at a time, but what are the sacred cows? What are the landmines that a superintendent, a new leader to an organization, should be wary of? I mentioned I was the youngest of 5 children. I was blessed to have my brothers and sisters step upon the landmines of my parents' rules. It made it very easy for me to navigate the world that was my home and my family's rules, because I had very clear examples. There are expert leaders in this school district who know where those sacred situations and those landmines are. And it's important to have that. My final question I ask everybody when I have these types of roundtables is, what keeps you up at night? Because parents will give you a very different answer than students, board members different than community organization, and organizations different than electeds. Again, to clarify, that advisory team would be a separate committee from the community engagement process, so that I could bring back the information to a safe environment where I could get information and then share with board members one-on-one, as well as in weekly meetings and in school board meetings as we move forward and develop the process for moving Lee County even further forward together.
Well, that's a well thought out and excellent answer. Thank you for that. At this time, I'll pass you on to Mrs. Giovanelli, our District 2 representative.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi.
How would you build a good working relationship between the board and the superintendent? Please cite examples, or as a superintendent, really.
Any type of relationship with a school board and a superintendent begins with communication. Then you have to say it again. Literally, I'm going to say it, communication. And then you have to say it again, communication. All of that is about building trust and transparency. I know that I'm about potentially to inherit a wonderful team that's done great work in Lee County. You have, as a collective board, moved the needle on student achievement. You've moved the needle for change, your bond referendum. You have built reserves. You are invested wisely. You've done amazing work. But anytime a team member changes, there is a process that every team goes through. And that is, they must form. And they must form around common definitions of communication, trust, transparency, relationship, They have to understand each other, and that would be my initial process. I would do that by building trust. And when I say build trust, I want to make sure that this is clear both to you and the community. The trust is a bank account. I used to do this with my middle school and high school students. Trust is something that you have to make deposits in long before you can make a withdrawal. But I believe it's also a two-way street. In the classroom, I believe teachers have to deposit into trust accounts with their students. And once that level of trust is built, we can make withdrawals, we can make errors or mistakes, but we have to be very careful in the beginning that we're communicating clearly, gathering the right information, talking about little details, because the devil will be in the little details. I would like to establish initial meetings with the Board of Trustees. If I interchange, that's what my school board is called, so I apologize. With the school board, I'd like to gain your perspective, both to the last question on strengths and weaknesses, but I'd also like to know what your desires are regarding the outcomes of Lee County schools. You all represent very different populations and very different aspects of the community. I'd also like to discuss with each of you what you mean and what your preferences are for communication. I have a friend who describes a superintendency as having 7 different dance partners. Some of you will like to waltz, some of you will like to jitterbug, some of you will have a different type of dance step where I must adjust to your communication style in order to make that work. I'd also like to establish every 2 weeks a meeting with individual board members so that we could sit in your office or mine, provide the same information to each one of you from the superintendent, and have some discussions about where we're headed as a school district. I'd like to establish those same meetings with the chair and the other elected officers to discuss agenda review process and making sure that we're bringing a clear understanding of the agenda to the board meetings each week. Additionally, I think it's important to establish a cadence of weekly and monthly communications, both formal and informal, in order to ensure that those communications are there. For instance, here in Clark, I was responsible for starting something called the Board Bulletin. That's where each one of the major divisions reports out to the board in written form, worked on by our communications department, to provide monthly updates of not only what we've done, where we're going, but where the future lies in the work that lies ahead. If warranted, I'd like to work with the board to see whether board work sessions could be available for us to discuss governance, to discuss superintendent evaluation, to talk about goals and outcomes in a transparent manner so that the community can hear what we have to say.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Krista Tricky here. I'm sorry, hi. Your question is...
I'm sorry, I'm leaning forward to hear my phone.
Okay.
I don't know, I have this vision of me being on a big screen and me hovering over all of it. Sorry.
Your question is to please describe a time or a setting where inequity and implied bias came to light, and from your position, how you addressed it, and what were the individual and/or organizational outcomes, please.
I heard most of it. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right. You wanted to know about a time where I saw inequity or bias and how I reacted to it and intervened?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've been doing that work for a long period of time. You go back to Orange County Public Schools, where we worked specifically on our discipline procedures, our code of conduct, how we responded to disciplinary infractions. From 2010 to 2014, Dr. Jenkins had put me in charge of revitalizing the approach to student discipline. Clearly, inequity and bias were really very apparent in the disproportionality of males, African-American males and Hispanic males who were being suspended and expelled from school. I have worked through that process to develop alternative to suspension centers in conjunction with county and city government, as well as the faith-based community, which gave students and families an opportunity that when or if a student had to be separated for a period of time from their school, they had a safe place with which to conduct their homework, have a certified teacher and a paraprofessional to help support their work so that mom and dad could go off to work and continue to support the family while the student continued their responsibilities in the classroom while not being present. I also work very hard here, and I'm going to save this example because I'm assuming I want to save my best example, but I work very hard with gifted education and universal screening here. But the idea that first came to mind goes back a ways. It goes back to my first principalship. Doing my research like I've done for all of you, I had come across the school improvement plan with the school advisory council. And I was disturbed by something that I read within the school improvement plan, but it never came up in my interview. When I was appointed principal, I spoke with my region leadership, and they offered me the opportunity to go through the school improvement plan and see if I had anything that was concerned. What concerned me was the plan specifically identified 145 students, mostly Hispanic and African American males, who were going to be put in a student discipline team that was going to be housed in the old agricultural building on a school building and in dilapidated portables. They were going to be wearing, I swear I'm not making this up, they were going to be wearing red shirts so they could be identifiable. They were not permitted to go to the cafeteria. They were going to have to receive cold lunches delivered to them via the cafeteria staff. The goal was for these students to earn their way back to the general population. Those instances and those rules violate everything I know about how you're supposed to treat children. And it wouldn't matter to me whether black, brown, white, male, female. Those are not ways young people should come to middle school. So I knew I had a difficult situation ahead, but I received permission from my regional superintendent to go ahead and begin to tackle the problem. Since it was embedded in the school advisory council plan, my first opportunity, who was on the interview committee, was to meet with my then chair of the school advisory council. We had a long discussion about the practice and what was planned. He shared all of his reservations, but he felt with the former principal that he did not have a way or means to speak up. So that gave us an opportunity to ground level and ground set early on about how I wanted my parents to interact with me and work with our school. So in collaboration with the school advisory council and with their permission, I began to meet with the impacted teachers. First thing out of their mind, as you can imagine, was they were going to be out of a job. They thought, if this program goes away, I'm not going to have a job. I assured them that we would still have 145 students on campus that still needed educators, that we would blend those students into the environment that they belonged in, and we would add additional resources through our guidance counselors, and at the time we had something called a SAFE coordinator, Student Assistance and Family Empowerment, to help track those young people and help support them with the choices they were making, which were leading to consequences and other issues. We had some work to do with the entire faculty because, as you can imagine, some of the faculty was very excited about these 145 not being in their classrooms. But I knew in my heart and soul what the right thing was to do by children. And if you're going to have inequities, like setting children aside, making them visible as to their issue or their reason for selection, and then not treat them fairly, I can only imagine what would have resulted from that. I will jump in case that doesn't get there. This is just one of the issues I tackled when I became the principal at a Title I, almost F school building. It was 1 point away from an F. That was my first principalship. When I left, we were C as in Charlie, C graded. We were fully inclusive. And some of these teachers were impacted, became my new leaders. They became the new group that really drove the continuing improvement process of the school. So while I've done work in lots of other ways, that is one that, and I don't have it anymore, but that's one of the things that curled my hair.
Very good, thank you.
Oh, goodness. Thank you. The next question is, please share a time when a plan or major object did not turn out successfully, and describe what you did to change that effort and how was the situation improved.
I know I'm supposed to be talking about a situation that I planned and turned out. I didn't hear the next word. Did it turn out well or did it turn out poorly?
Okay, please share a time when a plan or major object did not turn out successfully. And objective, I'm sorry, I'm confusing you. Or a major objective did not turn out successfully, and describe what you did to change that effort and how was that situation improved?
I have to be careful with this example, so somebody needs to give me like a time signal, because this one may go, if I'm not careful, it might go long.
I will give you that. And we all see you. You may only see one, but we all see you.
Okay.
So go ahead.
I would have to use a building program that the board and superintendent had devised in Orange County Public Schools, creating K-8 centers in the inner city of Orlando. The goal was to revitalize and collapse some of our smaller elementaries, rebuild some of them as K-8s, and to provide this new great environment for people within the inner core. As you can imagine, that's a very exciting opportunity at the very beginning, but people very quickly realized in two very historical buildings in my former community, Howard Middle School and oh boy, I was going to name it and I just forgot it. And one of our elementary schools, Hillcrest Elementary School, those families had purchased in that area specifically because of those historical school buildings. They loved Hillcrest. They loved being able to walk to downtown, walk their children to school, walk their children to middle school. And these K-8s were changing their environment. Their former attendance zone was going away. And these two school buildings had been attached with something we referred to in Orange County as the first zoneless magnets, meaning they were going to be by application only. And I don't think at the beginning of the process, because one of the responsibilities I had was student enrollment and working through the construction process as buildings were adjusted and fixed and revamped and built, I don't think at the beginning of the process the community quite understood it. But as time came along, between community members, the mayor, the county mayor, real estate agents, community groups, it became very clear to our board members that we need to do something to try to preserve Howard and Hillcrest elementary zones. Another one of my responsibilities at the time was the magnet office. So using Magnet Schools of America, I'll give them due credit in doing a lot of research on our own. As well, at the time, I had student enrollment policy, so I understood grandfathering, sibling transfer. We devised a way for those parents to have equitable opportunity to join the magnets. We even created something we called a zone preference. So not only would a parent applying for kindergarten at the elementary or sixth grade at the middle school have an opportunity to get in the regular lottery process, but in a sense, they were offered a second lottery ticket based upon geographic preference from the former zone. It turned out to be very successful. Both those programs are now, the K-8s went off, they were fully enrolled, they had enough enrollment to make that aspect, as you know, work, because enrollment's pretty critical in a new school building, but also the magnet programs took off as well. And they are both nationally recognized this time as Magnet Schools of America School of Choice programs.
Great, thank you. And you did that in record-breaking time.
A lot more detail. I'm learning to be brief.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Gittens is next, please.
And I have just one really quick follow-up on that. So you said the K through 8s went away and it just became magnet. Am I correct?
What we want, I'm not sure I understood the question completely, so let me just give a short answer and see whether that covers it. What we did was we continued with the K-8 project, but found a way for the young people who are already enrolled in the school to stay. We only recruited the youngest class, so we populated the zoneless magnet from kindergarten or sixth grade up through the 8th grade. And we used sibling transfer, so if they had an older brother and sister, they were automatically in. We used grandfathering in order to keep the older students in place. And then we created the geographic preference, which allowed parents who didn't have those other two options to still have an opportunity to join in the kindergarten or sixth grade where we were doing our recruitment.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, because it was a good point. I wanted to make sure I had it right. Good afternoon, and my question is, America is facing a vast teacher shortage. What strategies would you put in place to combat that crisis?
Yes, you are correct. I will give
Go
you just a
figure
quick
it.
answer to say we have paused the last 2 days, the Friday before the Martin Luther King holiday, and we paused again today. We flipped our calendar with a staff development day and a snow day. Believe it or not, you can occasionally need a snow day in Vegas. And we extended our weekend by 2 days because staffing-wise, we were up against this new COVID strain, and we needed a bit of a breather for our people and our children to go home. So I get teacher vacancies very well. I will tell you, our HR department always likes to say they're 95% staffed. In Clark County, that means 950 classrooms are going without a certified teacher. So we try to balance the 95% with the real figure. I'm trying to tell you that so you can understand a little bit about my desire to be transparent. Not me, I promise.
It's not me either, so.
It happens,
so
it
I
happens
just-
every once in a while, sorry
lot
about
of
that.
people-
So I just want to make sure that I heard that. So you said that when it's 95% staff, that it's, how many classes are vacant?
950.
Oh, geez.
So
Okay.
I understand the teacher shortage. But I think before I go into what we can do to attract teachers, I think one of the times we skip over what we need to do in order to retain them. And I think retention is a huge piece. I think retention of staff clearly is the first critical component. You need to have programs and things in place that allow teachers to grow without them having to actually leave the classroom. So there needs to be a career path for teachers that doesn't necessarily lead to administration. I think you have to have positive work environments. I think you need to have potentially some retention bonus programs. I think also that you need to have competitive compensation. I don't think you have to have the best. But I will tell you that in Orange County Public Schools, when we made retention a factor, and that goes back long, long, long ago, we had about an 8% gain in retention by just making it a factor that was discussed as a principal supervisor with principals during their annual evaluation. They were not directly evaluated on it, but it was part of the conversation. Why did Ms. Gittens leave? Why did Chris Bernier stay? Well, Ms. Gittens' husband was transferred to Iowa, so she had to go. Ms. Jones, where did she? Well, she didn't like me. Oh, well, what do you think that was about? So I think the first step to really retaining and dealing with the teacher crisis is about excellent school environments, and I will put pressure on myself and the other leaders. People stay in school buildings because of leaders. Mm-hmm. When I opened Odyssey Middle School as a second year, well, not a second year, my second principalship, and I reached out across the county to say, hey, I'm opening a brand new school. I had a plethora of people that wanted to work at Odyssey. They didn't necessarily like the drive because we were way out on the outskirts of town, as you can imagine how schools grow. But they wanted to work for Chris Bernier. And they knew what they were going to get in their leader, and they knew how they were going to be supported. So before we get into I'll move to the plans for retention now, but I think we have to find a way to retain our people. I think it's incredibly important. And I think it starts with leadership and school environment. Because if a person works for a great leader, they're going to stay with him or her. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important factor. I think one of the things you have to use is data. I think you have to know what your retirement scheme looks like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. How many people are going to be aging out of the system? Because you may or may not be able to retain them. After 30, 35, 39, 40 years, I think a person has a right to retire. And if that's what they choose to do, they do. But having a glimpse of what's coming allows you to plan. I think with that planning, you have to get into your university systems. You have to have a presence at national and regional conferences. And you need to be armed with something called a district-wide contract. We are going to have vacancies next year. This is a contract that will allow you to work within Lee County. We will find you a position. If you sign on the dotted line, here's a small signing bonus, and you will have a position. How can I get you information about rentals and apartments and everything else that you need to know, or housing if you're moving your entire family? I think the other places we have to lock down our student interns. Florida Gulf Coast University must provide quality interns to our school system. And with that, we have to be able to lock those individuals down during their senior teach. We can't wait for them to finish the senior teach, go back to their university, be recruited by somebody else. Again, district-wide contacts can help. I think you also can use, and we were on this when I left Orange, and I don't know how it completely turned out, but with the advent and the expansion of UCF into the downtown center, we were using them with our educational magnet to draw students into the education field. And if they gave us 4 years, working with the university about tuition waivers. So, because I know if I can keep a teacher in my school building for 4 to 5 years, I can keep them. If I lose them in 1, 2, or 3, the likelihood of them coming back to the education field is pretty small. So long term, I think you have to have a process that's attractive to young people. I think you have to have a process that creates environments that hold on to your more experienced teachers. And I think you have to come up with some incentives like we did just recently. We just provided 2 performance bonuses. One was paid in January to everyone except the cabinet level people for coming back after the winter holidays. We thought it was really important to acknowledge the work that's gone in. And then if they're still here in that last week of May before we close, they'll receive another incentive bonus. And that applies to the administrators, the teachers unions, our classified or support professionals, our bus drivers. It's just a way of saying thank you. And it's one-time, non-recurring funds, so it doesn't something that impacts the large budgetary issues of a school district of your size. So those are just some of my ideas related to teacher retention and the teacher crisis.
Okay, thank you so much. Next is Ms. Vaughn.
Hi, Betsy Vaughn here. If there were a conflict between different community groups in the district over a particular issue, how would you resolve it? And please cite examples that you've used.
I think there are 2 issues that I've used here in CCSD recently. One is ESSER 3. ESSER 3 dollars equate to about $790 million in Clark County. I know that's an extraordinary number, but I suggest whenever I say that out loud, everyone do the math. Divide it by 320,000 students, and you'll see we didn't get any more than anybody else did. But when you have that type of money flowing into a school district that quite honestly has not built its trust and transparency, the community was very skeptical of how those things would work. We utilized a process to involve the community. We brought in outside people to help us develop the system and the plan. We then engaged community groups to tell us what the priority spend should be. Those priority groups then turned in their information by holding their own meetings. The CCSD employees could be invited, but we weren't required to be there. We then put together a council representative of all of our 7 board members for the people who would review all of the information from the almost 7,000 community groups that responded. They came up with themes, and then we began the hard work of integrating it into our process. We then utilized, once we built the prioritized spending areas around our strategic plan, we then went out to the community in a survey. And the interesting thing, and I really wish I had planned this, it did not work out. I wish I had said I planned it, but I want to make sure it's clear. We had about 35,000 respondents, self-identifying primarily as employees or parents. But the interesting thing about the 35,000 was they had not participated in a community group. So in a sense, they became a check and balance against the work of the community groups and the work of the committee that then determined the common themes. And while I think one of the ways that I measure the success of engaging with community, and a community as wide as Clark, 6,000 square miles, is the word we get at the podium from either public speakers or specifically people who are commenting on the item. While there was some conversation about we need $100,000 more here, or we need additional money there, the general response was how positive the process was, how very engaged communities and community organizations had a chance to respond, and that at the very end, they felt listened to, and they felt the program moving forward aligned with what they thought their expectations should be. The other one that was real quick, and I'll be quicker with this one, is I had the wonderful opportunity just recently to be responsible for redrawing my trustees' election zones. Those are not done in the state of Nevada by the elections office. They're done by CCSD staff. Nothing better than redesigning election lines for your boss's 7 bosses. It's an experience. But I took my demographer and my government relations team, and we went on a seven journey meeting ride where we used the same identical process, looking at 3 potential maps. We garnered amazing feedback privately in a very difficult setting. You have to really want to listen to people, and you have to give them the opportunity to provide the feedback, and then you have to be transparent that you listen to them. So we used a very specific process to provide them detailed notes by within 24 hours of what we'd heard. We then, when we were done with the 7 meetings, we came back to the board. We said, this is what we heard. Some of our partners in the process in the community came and spoke, and the board directed us to use the information and develop 2 additional maps. I'll fast forward. There was more community engagement, but again, I go to the board meeting. By the time we were presented with the board meeting, we had 5 speakers. All of them spoke extremely highly of the demographer, of the process, and of maps 4 and 5. And while they may have had a personal preference 4/5 or 5/4, they were happy with both. The board passed it 6-1, and we had redesigned our trustee districts. That's not easy work to do, because when you line up constituents who have a vested interest in their trustee being reelected, it creates a very dynamic situation. And it's from experience in professional development and other places, as well as being a school building leader, where you learn how to facilitate a group like that and bring it to a positive conclusion.
Thank you.
Dr. Bernier, what has been your success as a school leader in partnering with higher education and the business community? Please mention the partnerships that have developed as a result of your leadership.
Well, in higher education, I would mention 2 universities. I would mention University of Central Florida, which clearly is the largest university in the Central Florida area. But we also work very closely with Stetson University as well. They provided everything from, like I said, the beginnings of helping to support our teaching magnets and providing our young people opportunities to begin to access college curriculum in their junior and senior years so they could be better prepared to step into the collegiate environment and prepare as an educator. They were working with us in terms of some tuition deferral, or even the possibility of removing the tuition requirement upon 4 or 5 years of excellent service as a teacher. Stetson and UCF also provide us a great opportunity for what I refer to as program evaluation. Sometimes you need somebody from the outside to come in with their doctorate, with their understanding of how programs need to be measured, and utilize those individuals to help put an independent process to a project or program or event, so that you can find out what's working, what isn't, whether that is still a good use of tax dollars. Are we getting the return on investment we need? Or do we need to change it? Or is it a matter of fidelity, which means we need to invest in it more so our teachers are better prepared to implement it? So those are my university partnerships. I have been involved with UNLV slightly here in leadership development. I am working with them right now with the Aldrin Foundation regarding STEM education. So those partnerships are yet to be determined, but I wanted you to be aware that that work continues here with the largest university here in town. I think the other area, and one I'm probably have better examples of, is with business. I had 2 great opportunities to start magnet programs, one with Northrop Grumman in laser photonics. That actually started at a conversation at a Chamber of Commerce meeting with an executive at Northrop Grumman, who was discussing with me the need for employees to get involved with laser photonics, but the struggle because they have to be U.S. citizens. And I said, well, I've got 209,000 kids. Some of them should be able to handle the mathematics and the work. And we began the process of building a magnet program at Wekiva High School so that students could not only graduate with the necessary math skills, but with employment at Embry-Riddle. Worked with Junior Achievement to start the first entrepreneurial magnet in the United States. It since has been replicated, and they've since turned over their responsibility to a partner company. But I was really proud of the work that we did at Oak Ridge High School to bring in an entrepreneurial program into an inner city school that really needed a way to attract additional children. I think the others are more in the Alternative Ed Center. I worked with Goodwill Industries to create school-to-work programs for our children so that they could be at school during the day and work at the same time, sort of an AM-PM shift. AM work, PM school, PM work, AM school. We built the same program at Universal Studios as well. Universal Studios is a flagship. It is an amazing school-to-work program, and when I left, we were moving beyond the hourly employee butterbeer parking attendant line guide to internships in the executive offices in marketing, vice president of research, and it really became an opportunity for our seniors to grow. The caveat with that program was when everybody was off on vacation, those children were working. So their winter holidays, their Thanksgiving holidays, their spring break, they were part of the work schedule. But I don't know if I'll get a chance to explain it, so I'll say it. During that same period of time in alternative ed, we raised our graduation rate in Orange County to over 90%. Our traditionals went up 9, but the alternative ed populations, in conjunction with working with the high schools, we went up 12% during that period of time. And I really credit those business opportunities and those business leaders for allowing our students a unique opportunity and one that met their learning needs.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Fisher.
Yes, thank you. As superintendent, Dr. Bernier, what would your role be in the budgetary process? Please specify. I
I'm going to
thought
have to
you'd
look
like
at a
that
couple
one.
of notes because I'm so happy. I took your board policies away with me, and I took your last financial audit report away with me, and I've been working on them. So I know about 1.04, 6.02, and 6.05. 1.04 talks about what my responsibilities are for all of you, everything from engaging and making sure that the public understands and the employees understand the budget, all the way through to making sure it's aligned to your strategic objectives and really building an opportunity to make sure that the direct resources are spent on student need. 6.02 is really big, but it really speaks to some of the same things about spending the money correctly, making sure that it's focused on student achievement, school safety, that it allows for district operations to continue, and maximizes what I love about it, and this is the first time I knew it. I smiled. It expects a maximization of the money to move to the school-based level. And there are so many districts that don't have that in writing. They say it, but when push comes to shove, they don't necessarily do it. So I think the last one, 6.08, if I have the number correct, is the investment of funds. So we have a responsibility with the CFO to work with you as a board and make sure that we are properly investing the funds so we could have a reasonable rate of return. So that was a nice place to dig in, and that led to me going back and reviewing my educational leadership, both as my master's program and at the University of Central Florida. My doctoral program is how the budget cycle works within Florida school systems. As you well know, there's a preliminary budget released in June. The fiscal year begins in July. Early July, we approve in my mind, a temporary final budget because there's a second hearing, usually in September. That sort of quantifies the money. Then we have October FTE. Then the process moves to, in December, we begin to turn in student counts and what our district enrollment will be. Then the legislature gets to play with it for a long period of time, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere from January, maybe through April and May, depending on how long the session goes. But in the meantime, what your budget department develops is a draft budget. They get the budgets out to the school buildings based upon DRA. They get the information to the principals so that they and their school advisory teams and their staff can make decisions about the following year based upon their expected student enrollments. And the cycle continues. I say all that to say this. This is an opportunity for us to consistently engage in a conversation about where we are strategically with budget, where we are strategically with how we're moving the needle on student achievement. It gives us an opportunity multiple times during the school year to have a conversation about maybe some cost overruns, for instance, and I don't mean in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes diesel fuel goes up, and so cost for buses need to be adjusted. And the CFO and myself would need to come and have a conversation with you. Other opportunities, like recently here in the state of Nevada, we got an opportunity to buy 3 electric buses under a state grant. So 3 of the buses we thought we were going to have to replace, we didn't need to. So the operations, myself, chief of staff, and our CFO got together. We made some adjustments to the budget, went to the superintendent, and presented it back to the board. I think I started the whole thing about board relations with communication. My job as the superintendent is to work with the CFO and the other chiefs, make sure that we're being accountable to the board policies that I mentioned, making sure that we're financing schools as the maximized priority, then dealing with budgets. I'm used to that, being both a school leader where I loved my budget and a district leader when I thought, wow, I don't really think I have enough money to get everything I need to get done. But I agreed that the schools, and still agree that the schools deserve the yeoman's piece of the funding, because that's where our children are. And that's a huge piece. I think the other piece is to continue always with the chiefs to look for operational efficiencies, always look for opportunities to find a chance to demonstrate to this community that we're fiscally responsible with their dollars and that we're above reproach. I think that's an issue that I think sometimes school boards and superintendents deal with. Sometimes people feel like there's some deals going on, and we have to find a way to be transparent so that people understand and are clear about why we're making the decisions we're making. So often I think sometimes we don't share the why. We tell them the how and the what, but we don't always get an opportunity to really explain the why.
Right.
That's a very generalized overview of the budget process.
It
I
sounded
could go into more
very,
detail if you wanted.
it sounded very well prepared, and you've definitely done your homework. Thank you. Mrs. Giovanelli.
Hello again. What is it about this position that makes you want to make a change at this time in your professional career? Please be specific. Thank you.
Watershed moment in an interview. I love this job. I love the idea. Always wanted to be a superintendent. I left Orange County. As you can tell, I don't move a lot of places. My Orange County resume looks like I can't hold a job, but I swear to you, all those jobs were within Orange County. And there were great opportunities to learn and to grow and to build a career. And I'm very deeply indebted to Jim Schott, who was the first person who hired me into a leadership role, and to Barbara Jenkins, who was the last person that I said goodbye to when I left Orange County Public Schools. The chance to come to Vegas was an opportunity to get closer to the superintendency, to see more of an opportunity to really get in deep with the superintendent regarding board, community, and really get into the work that has to be done with all the chiefs to keep all the things, all the parts moving, so the superintendent can focus on some of the other things that he needs to focus on in a system this large. Lee represents an environment that I would like to come to. And the more research I do, the more comfortable I feel. Like I mentioned, going into the budget process and finding out that there is a school board policy that maximizes the funding to the schools. That just aligns with everything you read about Lee County. It aligns with Envision 2023 and what the expectations are. It aligns with the hard work from whether it's in teaching and learning or the academic office to operations to chief information officer to the chief of staff. There's just amazing people there doing great work. You as a board are attractive to work for. You are knowledgeable. You are smart. I'm sounding like I'm doing professional development 101 and teaching the suck-up lesson. But you are. And I've watched a lot of your board meetings. You don't always agree, but you always make, for me, you always seem to make, from what I've seen, the best decision is always in the best interest of the children you serve. And sometimes politically that's not comfortable. Sometimes that's difficult. And yet time and time again in the meetings I've watched, you've done that. Lastly, I am not a Las Vegas person. I came to grow. I saw it as an opportunity to get better. I saw it as an opportunity to learn more. And when I told my superintendent that I would come out, I told him it was a 3-year deal with an option for a 4th or 5th if that's what I wanted to do. Jesus and I met back in August and September. And I said, boss, I really want to have the opportunity. And he has been nothing but amazingly supportive. And we're in a much better place than when I came. Our cabinet's aligned. We have the right people on the bus in the right jobs. We have a chief strategy officer that we've just brought on board. And we are moving forward with a very aggressive strategic plan, an ESSER plan, to move the needle on student achievement in Clark. And he has all the right people now. And he will tell you he's done all the hiring, and he has. But there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make sure he gets the right candidates. I look forward to the opportunity to have that opportunity to work with you as a school board, the community of Fort Myers, Coral Gables, the larger Lee County community, and most of all, to work with the students. It's what I do. I have a passion for educating and working with young people, and love working through administrators to accomplish that work.
Thank you. And ladies, I mixed up but I will come back to my number 9 at the end. Thank you. That was number 16 for me. Sorry.
Chris Patrica here. What would you do to positively impact student achievement? Please discuss in detail successful efforts to narrow or close identified achievement gaps in your current district.
In the current district, I think one of the biggest things we've done to close student achievement gaps is our work in equity and access. We have worked very, very hard in Clark County Schools with the Equity Commission to establish pain points, I will call them, in the K-12 continuum. You have been nationally recognized for your Head Start program, and if I don't get the position, I need to do even deeper research that I've learned about how you're doing that work. Because one of the pain points in CCSD for making a move on student achievement is the lack of quality pre-K environments. That's one of the places that's a pain point in order to get a student exiting the system, both college, career, and military ready. They get behind the 8 ball early. Additionally, kindergarten is not a requirement in the state of Nevada. It is on our legislative platform going into this legislative session in order to make it a requirement. We did get some work with starting them as early as age 5, depending on their birth date this year, but we could not get the legislature to move all the way because the reason was we were putting in place a new funding formula. The second pain point is in gifted. In 2nd grade, it really provides an opportunity for students not to be exposed to the same level of rigor. So we work very hard on creating 2nd grade universal assessment. That assessment during COVID was provided to over 12,000 2nd grade students. More than 8,000 took it. Our numbers in gifted were kind of scary. We had a 24% white population, but we were at 48% white and gifted. We had a 16% African-American population, but we were at 6% in terms of the number of kids in gifted. And our Hispanic numbers were at 45, and I believe our numbers within, I see where I have it. Yes. Our numbers within gifted for Hispanics was 34. So we had gaps. We had huge gaps in terms of equity with the universal assessment and the removal of private assessment. We qualified over 4,000 students. The gaps now for white students is +1. We're only 1 percentage point above the total population. In African American, we closed the gap to -1, so we still have 1% to grow. And then finally, we moved the Latino or Hispanic population to within -7. Not perfect numbers, but again, incremental movement and allowing things to get better and allowing things to continue to improve. And if we can keep on that track, then over time, those disproportionate numbers will disappear. They will graduate, and we'll have the opportunity both in 2nd grade, and I'm working with my boss right now to say we should do 4th grade too, since we have the ESSER dollars, because that's another opportunity to attract kids into the pipeline. The last two areas are in middle school advanced coursework, which I'm really impressed you already have a strategic goal surrounding. If young people come into middle school prepared, but they can't access the right classes in middle school, then they arrive in high school without the opportunity later in their four-year academic career to get into things like AP, IB, dual enrollment, collegiate enrollment, industry certifications, et cetera. So that primarily has been the diversity work that I've done here at Clark. If you want some examples from Orange, I could provide those to you as well.
Well, that's very good. Thank you. Next up is Ms. Jordan.
And if I may interrupt, this
Yes,
is the
please.
halfway point of the interview questions, and I just want to let you know that according to the schedule, we have 15 minutes left, but we, yeah, it was an hour and 15 minutes, so we will extend that by 15 or 20 minutes if we need to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My question would be, what do you consider to be your major strengths as an administrator? What have you targeted for personal or professional improvements? Please.
That is an excellent question. I think I talked a little bit about my strengths when I started. I think the aspect of being a student's first person, having integrity is a non-negotiable, being a good fiscal steward of the public tax dollar, whether that was as a assistant principal, district leader, here as chief of staff. You know, I don't spend money willy-nilly. I need to know what we're spending it on, what the return on investment is going to be, how we're going to measure the outcome. I think that I am a person who builds trust and transparency by that aspect of building trust bank accounts that I mentioned earlier. I think also that I work very, very hard on my relationships with people. I have said it out loud to my boss and to my boss's bosses. I will do my job. I will come and I will bust my tail with the work ethic that was instilled in me as a child and that I have worked with since I was born. But I will walk through a wall for a relationship. And I had that both in Orange with Dr. Jenkins and I have it here with Dr. Jara. And that's something I'd want to model for the staff, that it's about wanting to do it for the kids, but also knowing that the person that you're ultimately accountable to, who holds your evaluative pen, is going to reach down, get in the trenches with you as a servant leader, help support the process, own it with you. And when things go badly, that's on me. When things go right, I will give all the accolades away because that's how you build people. So I think those are some of my strengths. I think the shot at always trying to be excellent sometimes can be a barrier. But I will share with you that I want to be clear, I'm not saying I don't have these things. But inside my journal, which every time I fill one up, I get a new one, but I move the Post-it note. There's 3 reminders in my journal on the first page on a Post-it note. And it says poised, patient, and professional. And I'm all those things. But they are a great reminder to me every day when I sit at my little coffee counter in my house, when I open my journal to see what I'm going to be doing at 5 a.m., even though it hasn't changed from when I reviewed it the night before. It's just a nice reminder to me that no matter what's going on, no matter what's transpired, no matter if we've had really great weather or a snow day or a tornado come through the community, what people want from their leader is someone who is poised, patient, and professional. I have those attributes, but it's something I think that I have to remind myself of and work on every day.
Great, thank you so much, appreciate that. Ms. Gittens?
Okay. How would you handle decisions that are unpopular with the public, but educationally necessary? And please cite actual examples.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gittens, I didn't.
Okay,
I only got pieces of it. Could you
let me repeat it once more. How would you handle decisions that are unpopular with the public, but educationally necessary, and cite examples.
Oh, boy.
You wish I hadn't repeated that one, right? No.
I've already shared the experience of my suspension students, the 145 at Union Park Middle School. I will share with you that after that initial work, we worked very hard on becoming an inclusive environment with co-teaching and bringing our exceptional education students, our special ed students inside the building and making them a part of the general ed classroom where their IEPs were appropriate. Unpopular decisions are part of the process, right? In today's day and age, I'm figuring about 50% of the people are happy and 50% of the people aren't. It's a pretty divided community nationwide. But I think if you're making the things in the best, making decisions in the best interest of children, and again, going back to the why. So I think there's several things I try to do with a difficult decision or difficult news. I try to prepare myself. Several years ago, my father passed away. I really thought about what the conversation was going to be like for my two children. I needed to pull myself together, not to be clinical about it, but to make sure that I could get through the conversation and they would understand what happened and what was expected of them. I think with difficult decisions, you can't wait. I think the longer you wait, if a decision's been made, the more likely it is to get out, the more likely it is to get out, the more angry people get that they didn't know. I think you have to maintain respect for other people's opinion. It does not mean you have to agree with them at the end, but you have to acknowledge their resistance. Those are words that I've used, sort of like putting yourself in their shoes. You have to, as a leader, understand who's not going to be happy and their why. I think, though, at the end of being prepared and not waiting and once the decision's made, getting it out there, I think you have to set expectations for, again, why you're doing it and what the expected outcome is expected to be, and then you have to plan for that. You have to be prepared to tell people, here's how we're going to know if this decision, which we knew was going to be unpopular, here's how we're going to know in 6 months, a year and a half, I'm just using arbitrary timeframes, how we're going to know if the decisions we're making are being successful. At Odyssey Middle School, I had the opportunity to leave Odyssey as an A-rated with 99% of AYP satisfied. It's still one of my 1% still bothers me. That's my perfectionism and my excellence that's talking again. But we had to make a decision about halfway through my tenure there to change our reading intervention program. We had invested a significant amount of money in the program, a significant amount of money in teacher training and staff, but we had squeezed that lemon and we got as much juice out of it as we could get out of it. We needed to change direction. And those are some of the things I remember talking with my staff about we have to make some decisions for the betterment of the kids. And again, it goes back to that issue. And I remember a math teacher who was with me at Union Park Middle and followed me to Odyssey, who put her arm around me at the end of the meeting, and she said, with the curriculum counselor, said, I know that was hard, but we're making the decision in the best interest of kids. And we know you'll help us through this part of the journey as well. So that's how I think you approach difficult decisions.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Give us some specific ideas on how you would judge your own effectiveness as a superintendent and how the board should evaluate your work.
I know there are a lot of superintendents nationwide that aren't evaluated. And evaluations here in Clark County have been difficult to come by for our superintendent. I believe there should, like in my work with my direct reports here and my work in my former life in Orange County, I believe there needs to be an initial meeting of what the expectations are, what I would like to be evaluated on. I'll give you some examples in a minute. what you would like to evaluate me on, and making them definable and measurable. I think they're going to revolve around, I hope they're going to revolve around the strategic plan, student achievement outcomes, closing of achievement gaps, graduation rate, maybe on-time percentage for buses. I'm just using, percentage of free and reduced lunch meals being served. And there's lots of metrics in a school system which a superintendent can be evaluated on. But I think in an initial one, we should agree on what the big ones are. And I would take on, I don't shy away from accountability, so I would take those on. I think fiscal responsibility and solvency is another area. I know there's a 3% minimum reserve, but 5% or greater is really what we'd want to have in case the federal government didn't help us out during COVID. I'd like to have an interim or a formative evaluation somewhere in the process where I would get feedback as to whether I'm on the right path, not on the right path. Today, I sent a lot of my direct reports an email, a reminder that next week we're going to do interim evals. They're not binding. It's just an opportunity for us to have a conversation if we're on track with the goals we set collaboratively at the beginning of the year. And then clearly there needs to be a final eval. I'm fine with that information being public. I think it's one of the things that you have to do as a superintendent is model for your administrators, your teachers, your classified staff, your bus drivers, what a good assessment process would look like. I hope that it could be a balance of both quantitative, which I kind of mentioned before with student achievement to grad rate, but also some qualitative assessment as to how people feel about certain things, how they feel about their school, how they feel about their local district, how they feel about their superintendent, his visibility, his openness. Because I found as a leader in Orange here and as a principal, those types of questions, I was an A-rated school with 99% AYP completed. I moved to high school from C to an A. But how did people feel about me at the end of the day? That's important to me. So I'd like to have some qualitative data in it as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Bernier, would you please describe your beliefs about student discipline and safety?
That's a big topic. Student safety is, I'll start with safety. Safety. Safety is paramount to me. When young people come to school, they should be coming to a safe environment where a culture has been built where at least, and this is a very low standard, but at least they know at least one adult in that school building is their go-to person. It's the person that they know will stop and care about them. And it's not something you can force, but it is something that you can expect. It is something that you can drive as a standard in your interviewing processes when you're looking for individuals to fill classrooms and fill other roles within your school building, to ensure that everyone has school safety on the top of their minds. If I was in person, I would go a little differently to some other examples that I have, but I can't see everybody's face, so I'm going to hold back just a little. But if they come with 10 fingers and toes, that's how their parent wants them to come home. And as a building level principal, as a superintendent, as a chief of staff, that is my primary responsibility. I won't go into detail here, but this past spring we had a military jet go down on approach to one of our Air Force bases. That plane crashed within 600 feet of a kindergarten playground. Immediately fired up the EOC, immediately dispatched the superintendent, immediately got on the horn with our board members, and we began the pattern of getting information, feeding it back, got with my comms office, etc. So school safety is everybody's responsibility. And it's not just a locked door. It's not just a secure piece of glass. It's about internal in the building as well, that young people understand that in the community, on the bus, in the school building, walking home, we all have responsibilities for each other's safety. Drugs, alcohol, weapons. We don't know why they're coming. We don't know who the victim is. It may not be you, but it may be me. If it's me, I'm going to see something and say something. If it's you, I need you to do the same, because it's only together that we can build an environment of true safety amongst our children. And knock on wood, I've been blessed. I also know that I've planned for the eventuality should one of the most tragic things that could ever happen in a school building occur. I hope I never need the plan, but I know that it's vital to be prepared and to ensure that we're moving forward. I guess I have some of the same beliefs about student discipline. I think discipline sometimes has a misnomer. I think sometimes people equate discipline with punishment. Discipline really is the way you behave when people aren't watching. And as a middle school educator and a high school principal, and as a associate superintendent, and when I have the opportunity to interact with principals now as the chief of staff, it's something we talk about. How do we instill in our kids that sense of self-discipline, that way to behave, so that when school situations transpire, when other things occur, that they have an opportunity to understand as best they can what's happening and make proper decisions even after the fact. I always valued honesty in my office, even when the most egregious thing had occurred. Because if there was a way to reward that honesty, I thought it was vitally important not to forego rules, but to find a way in the code of conduct to let the student know that whatever was transpiring may have been slightly less based upon what had transpired, based upon their willingness to admit it. Because people make mistakes, and as adults we make mistakes. And the worst thing you can do is try to hide it and lie behind it. It will get you in trouble every single time. One of the things I tried to do in that aspect, and I'll be briefer here, is PBIS. Positive Behavioral Intervention Support. Our code of conducts are huge. They're a big long list of everything that'll get you in trouble. You can usually come up with really 5 or 6 words: responsible, truthful, caring, respectful, to conduct yourself, and you never have to worry about the code of conduct. And really, that's what we ought to be driving in student discipline. Making them self-disciplined, helping them understand when situations do happen, because everybody makes a mistake. Honesty will help pay off. And give them a roadmap to navigate both their school situation, home situation, bus, whatever the situation is related to school or home. Give them a way to move forward with a set of very clear expectations that if you conduct yourself in this manner, you probably will never have to worry about who your principal is or who your dean of students is.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, thank you. Okay. Given the changing dynamics of public education, what do you see as the critical issues in the next 5 years?
Nationally, with all schools, Lee County specifically, both?
Both.
Let's start larger and wider. I think that all school districts are going to have to figure out what the new normal is upon full return. And that new normal is going to be different. I think we're going to have to deal with situations where virtual schooling is going to become an additional method. I had the luxury of being the Orange County virtual principal and training Brandy Gurley, who is still the principal of the Orange County Virtual School, and building a very strong virtual program. But virtual education is not for everyone. We learned that during the pandemic. But I think virtual schooling is going to continue to grow. With that, I think, and it will have to be done with the state legislature and other individuals, but I think you're going to see a shift between mastery learning and seat time. I think there is the possibility of the future holding an opportunity where if a student can demonstrate mastery of a content, they can move on, that they don't have to sit in a Carnegie unit in order to wait for a final grade based upon the number of hours they spent in a seat. And with that comes some of the things that I did in Orange. We were working on flexible hours in order to get young people who didn't fit the 7 to 3 o'clock high school standard traditional environment. We gave them opportunities to go to work. We gave them opportunities to go to school at different times. I don't have all the answers to this, but I can envision a time where our high school campuses look somewhat like a collegiate campus, where they're open at certain hours and there's night classes as well. And young people don't come and go, but they're built into a process which gives them the opportunity to maybe make money, to make and help support family members who may have been injured, or a mother who has to work and there's a younger sibling that needs someone. We have to remember not everybody grew up in a household. I remember it, honestly, being the youngest with a single mom. There was a lot of responsibility on my plate. So those are all some alternative pathways to graduation, and I'll end with, I really think that there's an opportunity for apprenticeship and internship programs that may even be paid. As industry certification grows, as alternative pathways to college and career ready happen, there's going to be an influx of college into our system, which we're already seeing with dual enrollment. We're going to see industry come in with opportunities for our young people, and we may even see some of the kids headed potentially into a marketing or other career have that opportunity to have an internship or even a paid internship in a corporate environment. I think it's really exciting what could happen. But I think I go back to the first step is we have to begin to get our hands around what it's going to look like, knock on wood, when someday this all goes away, or it becomes a level of infection within our community like the flu, and it's tolerable, and we've learned to live with it.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much. Ms. Giovanelli.
This is actually number 9, ladies. What experience have you had in working with a community of diverse elements such as socioeconomic, educational levels, culture, race, and ethnicity? Please explain in detail. Thank you.
I'll give you 2 quick examples. I already gave you the ESSER 3 situation with multiple communities, so everyone from the NAACP to Opportunity 180 to the Public Ed Foundation to all those individuals and their organizations who have the better mousetrap for us. Finding a process to truly engage with them was incredibly important. The other one I was going to share with you just left my mind because I wanted to jump on what I had already said so I could organize my thoughts. I'm embarrassed. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
What experience have you had in working in a community of diverse elements such as socioeconomic and educational levels, culture, race, ethnicity? Please explain.
One of the other examples I wanted to share with you is working with the AACCC, the African American Council of Christian Clergy. Until you work with them, you have no idea how to say it. Pastor Zach, Pastor Mills, really working with them in creating something around 3 pillars: law, education, and faith. We worked with FAMU, the new law school that opened in the city of Orlando, and we built a Spreading the Dream Martin Luther King celebration at the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center for middle school students. It was an avenue that when Dr. Jenkins called me to the conference room to participate in the meeting, clearly I was a little uncomfortable at the beginning. I didn't really know the leaders in the room. But I thank God for Dr. Jenkins every day. She gave me the opportunity to grow and to build relationships And I can't tell you how many other times working in alternative ed or working with an alternative to expulsion center that I use those pastors, that I use their youth organizations to make the difference in the lives of children who had made bigger mistakes than most make, but needed the opportunity to know that they could be forgiven and come back to a school, or be forgiven and come back into their community. And those pastors became an amazing resource to me. I worked very, very hard with local community groups in creating a accelerated middle school program, trying to get children of disproportionality through middle school who had been retained because of the third grade retention in the state of Florida, and then maybe some overzealous elementary principals who are arriving into middle school with very, very little hope of graduating before 16. The 16-year-old going into the ninth grade, likelihood of graduating is almost 0%. So that work, working again with those same individuals, built a way for us to build a accelerated middle school program that allowed young people to complete a year of middle school in a semester. The final semester, if you can track me, 6th grade, 7th grade was 1 year, 8th grade was the 2nd year, and then we scheduled them into high school courses with no dangling credits. We would start with the virtual school with mathematics and language arts, but if they completed, we then could move into a science class. So that when they arrived into 9th grade, depending on what they chose, traditional high school or alternative, they would have already some credits towards graduation. And I will say most chose the opportunity to go on to alternative settings or even a charter school, because in some cases going back to the traditional high school put them in a situation with the same peer group. So again, currently I'm with the West Las Vegas Neighborhood Promise Group. I won't get into the history of Las Vegas, but I will tell you that when Sammy Davis Jr. performed on the Strip, he was not welcome in any of the hotels. He had to go to the historic West Side, and that's where he stayed. That community is one that I was honored to be selected by them to sit with them as we plan the future for those children, ESSER funding, community events, and driving a different trajectory amongst those student populations.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Bernier. We are finishing up now, and we are going to give you an opportunity to, if you have questions for the board, and then for a closing statement, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Fisher, who will end the meeting. Ms. Fisher?
Okay, so
all of you asked me a ton of questions, and I thank you very much. They were very comprehensive. I really appreciate the opportunity for the stretch. No matter how this turns out, I know that I will be a better person for remembering everything that I've accomplished in what I think is a short period of time, but the mirror tells me something else.
One second.
one second. I'm sorry.
What would be one of the foundational beliefs that someone on the board has for what would make the next superintendent successful in Lee County, with the community, with the board, and with the staff?
Ms. Fisher, can you have him repeat that, because I don't think he
Yes,
recognized the noise.
we had a little bit of interference. Could you repeat that, please?
We had some interference on our side, so could you repeat what you had stated, please?
I don't think he could hear.
I'm sorry, you didn't hear the question?
No,
No.
it was, you had just made a statement, and if you could repeat that, because while you were speaking, there was some noise going on our side, and we were not able to hear you clearly.
Hopefully you heard the part where I thank you for all your time and all the effort and all the work. What do you believe is a foundational belief that the superintendent will need to have in order to be successful, both with the internal, including yourselves, teachers, principals, and the external stakeholders?
Well, I'll answer first, or let me
go ahead,
see
Ms.
if
Fisher.
anybody else has any. Ms. Gittens has a comment.
Very simply, communication, 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 as you stated earlier.
And then anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay.
I do.
Yes.
I would say an ability to manage your management team, meaning the board. I say that with a smile behind my mask.
I know I ran long, so I'll only ask one other question. And hopefully I'll have an opportunity within Lee County to ask you some more, either privately or publicly in another interview. If you had the chance to privately pull a superintendent candidate aside and say, this is the one thing you need, now that I know, other than communication, to be successful in Lee County, what would that be?
Ms. Vaughn? Integrity. And I think that one of the comments you made when you did your opening statement was that you're a hands-on servant leader, and in my estimation, that would be important also.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Gittens?
And just one more I would have is in inclusivity or inclusion in decision-making, inclusion in decisions and decision-making.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I got the inclusion and making sure that in the sense that the right stakeholders are at the table and people have an opportunity to provide their input.
So you will, she put a thumbs up. So you will be hearing from us, and hopefully we will get to meet in person. And at this point, if you have no other questions for us, I think we are ready to let you go. And
Closing statement.
Closing statement.
Yeah, did you have a closing statement to make?
I just want you to know, as a board, it's been a pleasure to watch your meetings and watch you go through the process of selecting candidates. You are amazingly honest with each other, and it was refreshing to see. I do want you to know that every candidate should be aware of the elected superintendency issue. It didn't come up as a question, but I was aware, and I did apply knowing that. And if you don't mind, I would hope that I could prove over what could be a very short tenure, depending on what the elected do in the state of Florida and the community does. I hope that we could prove together that the selection of a great superintendent and one who will work with the board and the community could potentially put that issue to rest for all of us. If not, I've never considered public office. I would have to talk to somebody who's got more guts than I do to have run for a political position. But my goal would be to work with all of you so that the community would like the tax referendum that they passed so overwhelmingly for you, that they would look at that item on the ballot and just think, we just don't need that anymore. So that's my commitment to all of you, and I look forward to hearing from you and the search consultants in the days ahead. Good luck with the rest of your candidates. And again, if there's anything that Clark County School District can do for you or for any children that have been impacted by the event, please do not hesitate to have someone reach out to me.
thank you very much. We appreciate that. Okay, then.
Thank you for the additional time.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Thank you. Okay. So then,
Should I log out now?
Yes. Yeah, you're good.
you can log out now.
Thank you.
Leave. It was a
Yes.
pleasure.
Thank you. The pleasure was ours.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Goodbye.
Ms. Patrica.
I sent a question to Dr. Savage, and I believe it's a question I've run by the board attorney before, whether ESSER 3 funds can be used to upgrade technology in the boardroom. I'm being serious. The amount of man-hours that were spent
Yes.
were wasted if we had just spent the money on technology. So I want you all to know that I sent that question to the superintendent. I would expect the answer to come back in a board update. And as frustrating as it was in the beginning, I know you guys did everything humanly possible to make this work, and you really did do a good job. It's tough to make 1980s technology work in 2022. So thank you. You stretched